So if you're new here, you should be aware that I've played through the entirety of Black Myth Wukong on my channel. It's inside of my stream tab on YouTube. I've streamed the entire thing. The only one that you're going to kind of have some lapse in is the part 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that of my stream, the Yellow Wind Ridge one, because I ended up streaming for 12 hours, actually 12 and a half hours. YouTube only allows you to stream for 11 hours and 55 minutes before they cut it off. So unfortunately, you can't get the rest of that footage of me finishing the boss fight, but I digress. My entire playthrough is on the channel. Now, with that being said, I did say at the end of my playthrough that I wanted to kind of revisit and spin the block around on the content for Black Myth Wukong, because I really did want to talk about my feelings after the fact of beating it and getting the secret boss and then beating it a second time, but not on New Game Plus. I just had to beat the boss again so that way I could get the final ending, the chapter thing. This is something I want to do without having too many spoilers in it, like at all. So I'm going to speak about things in a very vague way. So that way, if you're still on the fence and you're kind of like, I don't know if I should really go for the game, you still have the option of just listening into like my review in a sense and still going to decide if you're going to pick up the title for yourself. Now, let's answer the first question. Should you pick up this game? Absolutely. If you are somebody that loves action, adventure, RPGs, this is definitely a game for you. If you're somebody that likes Souls-like games, this is for you. But that is not me saying that this game is a Souls-like. This game I would consider a Souls-light, much like the genre that we have for roguelikes and roguelites. So what is a roguelite? Or in this case, what's a Souls-light? So to say something is a Souls-like means that it mimics almost exactly to the T what a Souls game would be, you know, what a Soulsborne game would be, and the stuff and the styles from Software. However, when you add the word light at the end of it, L-I-T-E, it is essentially saying that the game takes some of those elements, but it still has more of an original feel and spin to it, but it does make you feel like you're still in a similar genre. Something that I really want to touch on with this game is so much of the emphasis on the combat. I think when I first played my first playthrough of the game, I was constantly thinking, and I would have this type of conversation with a good friend of mine, it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a little bit more Devil May Cry-ish in the sense of having multiple combo strings that you could do, where it's like square. Okay, I'm gonna reference PlayStation in this sentiment, in this regard. Square, 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 and then circle and triangle, and then like all those things and inputs lead into a separate combo string, similarly to how like Stellar Blade works and operates. But again, I haven't played through Stellar Blade, so I'm not going to reference that too much. I've only played the demo. Anyways, back to Black Myth Wukong. It doesn't necessarily work that way entirely until I guess later, like much later on, there is technically an option in a way that you could get that combo string opened up where it has all these different hidden combo paths with it. But when you're just playing the base game for the first time and you're getting through all the way to the ending, you basically have one staff and you can upgrade that staff. You can get different versions of the staff, and what that does for you is it'll just have the same combo strings, meaning you press the same button over and over, and then you might put in like one alternate button in there. Like, so let's say you press square 3 times and then you press triangle once or twice. It might lead to one combo string, but it's only within that one singular stance. I was kind of having the thought that when we got this game, we would be able to run into the combat and switch between the different stances on command in the middle of a combo. So for people that have played this game, you'll understand. Imagine if you're in the smash stance and you're, instead of, you know, you start your combo with your square, your light attacks. I would just say light attacks moving forward. Let's say you start your combo string with your light attacks, but you're starting in the smash stance, and then you want to change into the pillar stance midway through. You're not able to do that to get the pillar stance's special heavy attack that is roped into the combo string. If you do that and you do switch stances, it's still going to register all of your inputs in the original stance that you was in while you started your combo string. I would have liked to see something along the lines of mixing in the different stances inside of one singular combo string. I say that to just say, like, I didn't have many downsides to playing through this game. I mean, you've seen it throughout my experience streaming. Of course, there were moments that I got frustrated and gotten super loud, and that's always going to happen when you're playing these types of games, but it doesn't inherently mean the game is bad. I think some people really misinterpret my rage and my gamer rage, because that's really what it is. It's gamer rage. You're in the moment, you're immersed, you're trying to get through something, you get frustrated, you lash out on the audience, you lash out at the game itself, you lash out at developers, whatever, but it's all in good fun, it's all in good nature. The game really barely had any caveats that I would be like, oh man, this is definitely a deal breaker. However, I know that I'm kind of somebody that is the minority in this aspect, because I played the game on PS5, I pre-ordered it on PS5, and I only ran into 2 game-breaking bugs the entire playthrough. Now, of course, optimally, you would want to not run into any of them at all, but it did happen, and I played through the entire game basically on like a day 1 patch essentially, or maybe the one before, like whatever the pre-order was. I think the game updated once or twice, maybe over the course of the 2 to 3 weeks that it took me to beat the game, right? With that said, the 2 bugs that I really ran into was the fact that at certain points in the game, when there was a lot of stuff going on, it would get very stuttery, and I would be like in my mode in the middle of like a boss fight, and I can remember vividly, I'll be in the middle of a boss fight. Again, I'm trying to be vague here, I don't want to say which bosses, and I would be getting through it, I'm making my dodges, and then the game starts stuttering, and then all of a sudden it's running super smooth, and then I get basically blue screened, right? My whole PS5 just gray screens, that's what it's really called, and then it boots itself out and it crashes, so that I have to get back into the game. It works perfectly fine. I'm on a whole nother 10-12 hour run, and then all of a sudden, boom, I hit it again fighting another boss. But I never ran into those crashes ever again. It happened 2 times, I think 2, maybe 3 times my entire playthrough, and it is live on stream if you want to go back and look at my different parts to find out where those actually happened in the story for me. Now, something that I did run into is constant stutters that would happen only in longer gaming sessions. So what that means for me is anything that is past 3 hours personally is what I consider a long gaming session. Like if I'm playing COD, which I hardly do. I am kind of excited for BL6 though. It's been a while since I've played a COD, maybe that's why. Anyways, if I'm playing COD, if I'm playing Cyberpunk, whatever, any game that I'm playing, as soon as it passes the 3 hour mark, I would consider it a long gaming session. I would consider an average gaming session to be an hour and a half, okay? So 2 hours to 2.5 hours, I would consider like, okay, you're kind of like, you're immersed, but you might not spend too much time. Anything after 3 hours, you're already too far gone. And there's nothing wrong with long gaming sessions. I'm just telling you how I see it from my perspective, because once you're 3 hours in, it's likely you're not going to be stopping until you've played the game for like 7 hours or 15 hours or whatever game you're playing, unless you're streaming, of course. But if you're not focused on streams and you're not focused on I need to edit and record and whatever, you're probably gonna get down, sit down somewhere, lay down somewhere. You're gonna either play Wukong, you're gonna play whatever video game that you're interested in, and as soon as you pass the 3 hour mark, you're already too far gone. It's gonna be way longer than 3 hours before you actually get off the game, and it's really rare that you're gonna just stop at like 3 hours and 2 minutes, 3 hours and a half, and 4 hours or something like that. So anyways, I digress. Anytime that you kind of got past my criteria for a long gaming session, I would notice that if I was running through the menus too quickly, like let's say I have the controller in my hand right now and I'm playing the game, right? And I'm over here so you can see reference, and I'm going through menus, I'm going through skill trees, and I'm just like, you know, like I'm just going through the motions very quickly. The game would start freezing up, and it's like lagging behind. It's trying to catch up. But again, nitpicking, it's not necessarily groundbreaking and it's not game breaking, but I'm just letting you know the issues that I ran into with the game off the bat before we get into like the positive, which is pretty much everything about the game. Okay, that type of stuttery behind behavior followed not only just in the menus, but also in parries and dodge mechanics, because again, if there were too much stuff going on at once, it would just like, I forgot what the word is called or what the phrase is called, but it would register your inputs even after you've already pressed it, and you're like, okay, I can see physically what's going on screen, and I am trying to do something completely different. So with that being said, yeah, you know, that can get very annoying after, again, like that 3-hour mark, and I would notice it happen a lot, actually, and I would constantly comment on it while I was streaming. Sometimes I was staying quiet, but a lot of times I would comment on it while I was streaming and just be like, you know, it feels like when I'm dodging, it's not dodging exactly, or I would get, actually, that's like the most tame way I would say it, because honestly, when it would happen, it would be when you're in these high stress and very tense, very intense situations. So it'd be a boss, or you're surrounded by a bunch of different enemies and you're trying to dodge and move out the way. There's a bunch of particle effects going on screen and shit, and it's just like, it's stuttery a little bit, and I'm like, yo, I pressed this, why is it not registering my dodge? And then that could be the difference between moving forward in the game, because you might constantly die on a certain boss or whatever, because it could, and this is my experience personally, consistently stutters at certain points. And it doesn't seem like this is a PS5 exclusive issue. It seems like this is just Wukong in general. Before the game came out, again, for people that aren't aware, before the game actually released, about a week or two before it released, they released a benchmark tool to actually help you run the game on your PC. They would say, okay, if you're up in the air about if you can play this game, we're releasing this benchmark thing. Now just run this on your computer and see if it can run the game. And you would go into kind of like a main startup title menu version of Black Myth Wukong, again, before the game was released, and then it would make you go through these settings and see where your system performs. It is well known now at this point, across all boards, across all consoles, which is really just PlayStation and PC essentially. Okay, against both of these, performance was not great at all. Like it just was constantly tanking. It wasn't steady and it wasn't consistent. So that tells me it's just the game wasn't optimized very well. So it wasn't just a me experience. This might not be your experience if you are getting the game in another week from now or 2 weeks from now. Whenever you see this video, if it even becomes popular enough and gets enough attention on it, it's a possibility that you're not even going to see any of the issues that I'm mentioning, considering that, you know, it could have been patched out. Now, the last issue that I actually had with the game had nothing to do with the story, had nothing to do with the pacing, had nothing to do with any of those things. It was a gameplay system. I would say the first 2 chapters, I was like, this game is damn near flawless. Actually, it was the first chapter I was saying this game is flawless. This is 5.5, 6 hours into the game. I get to chapter 2 and I'm getting through the majority of the chapter and I'm thinking, okay, this game is still great. It's perfect. It's a 15 out of 10. And I learned real quickly that I was gonna have to bring that down to like a 10 out of 10. 5 points off of my scale. I know my scale means nothing to you. Just giving you a reference of like how impactful it was for me. Is in any game ever, I cannot stand gimmicks, like gimmicky enemies, which, if you're not aware of that term, a gimmicky enemy is somebody that basically breaks the fundamentals of how the game works just to give you this sense of difficulty, and it's typically artificial, like very artificial. For example, an enemy that shoots faster than you can dodge, they're shooting something faster than you could dodge or than you can run. It's sort of gimmicky because it's not like fighting and killing that enemy is inherently hard. It's just difficult to get close to it because they're moving quicker than you can. That's a gimmick. There's certain ways to do gimmicks that make sense, and it's kind of like it adds to the immersion, but most gimmicks are bad. It is what it is. In this case, in Black Myth Wukong, there was a gimmicky enemy in chapter 2 towards the ending of chapter 2, depending on how you go around the map, because chapter 2 really opens up a lot. And this particular enemy, they had like the slam down attack. Again, I'm being very vague on purpose, but for people that's played the game, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. They have this slam down attack that makes this electricity go all across the ground, and the only ways to get through it is either A, to dodge it, which you would have to almost do like a perfect dodge, because the second option for evading this attack would be to jump. So they kind of treat the dodge in a pseudo sense of a jump, because you're dodging, you're rolling over the attack that's on the ground that would electrify you or electrocute you. So the way that you have to dodge it is by going over it, essentially. That became a problem where his rhythmic attacks stopped being 1 2 1 2 3 in a sense, right? And stopped doing it to the motion of how you could actually dodge, and started going to the point of, okay, you're attacking quicker than I can actually move. You're attacking quicker than I can dodge. So this isn't even fair. You're just out here giving me a hard time when you're not inherently hard yourself. This point isn't one-to-one. It's only really an issue for Black Myth Wukong because you don't get these iframes that you might be used to if you're playing games like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, and stuff like that, other Soulsborns or Souls-likes, and whatever the case may be. Typically in a game when you can dodge pretty well or parry, you're giving some type of invincibility frames, so when they are attacking quicker than you could actually like physically press a button, it still kind of chains together very well, and you can constantly press circle or whatever your dodge button is back to back to back. You can't constantly just press your dodge button back to back to back in Black Myth Wukong and dodge everything like that. If somebody hits you in the middle of you dodging, they hit you in the middle of you dodging. Whereas in a game again like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, if they try to hit you mid dodge, you have like this iframe, so you can depend, you know, it's on your timing. There is really hard to get that timing down for Black Myth Wukong with the stutters, the lagging behind, and add on to that, you know, they're just attacking at a weird pattern, then your character can actually reset for the next dodge. Like I can constantly go back and fight this enemy and get him to more than half health down, whatever, until he gets into this phase where he starts to just do this, to me, bullshit attack. I just don't like that. And then it started trickling down from bosses to regular enemy types. That was just one example. And I guess to make my point kind of stand a little bit more on that stance, if you're getting kind of clipped constantly because you're dodging over one thing and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna dodge over the next one, move on to the next phase of the fight, you can't do that, because if you dodge one, there's a second one immediately coming like right after it that's within a certain, I guess you would say, distance or radius, that if you dodge the first one, you would immediately get hit with the second one, because you can't dodge and chain those jumps or dodges together that quickly. And so the only other way to get around that would be to use, again, no spoilers here, but you have 3 stances in the game. With one of those stances, you can stand on your staff. And when you're on your staff, any ground attacks or any attacks in general that's like towards you that isn't physically hitting your person because you're on your staff, you're on your pole, it doesn't affect you. However, it does do damage to your stamina. And if your stamina runs out, you fall down off of your staff, potentially taking damage depending on how high up you are. But you know, I could see maybe running through the game again on a new game plus and having a buttload of stamina, but by that time in the game, again, you're only in chapter 2 of the game when you run into your first gimmicky enemy. At least for me, first gimmicky enemy, you don't have enough stamina to tank his attack at all. I don't care how many points you put into stamina, you don't have enough stamina at all during that point in the game, unless you really grinded and leveled up and just kept putting skill points into something. You just don't have enough stamina to tank through those attacks at all through that point in the game. So it's just a gimmick, because if you use that one thing to try to evade it, you're gonna fall eventually. You're gonna take extra damage from the fall. Then you're gonna take damage from getting electrocuted on the ground. And if you try to dodge it, you're gonna get clipped anyway. So how did I beat him? I just did everything and anything in my power to prevent him from actually doing the attack. It's on video. You can see it. It's on stream. You know, I quite literally just tried to phase that portion of the game out of my head because it truly frustrated me, and that was the first enemy in the entire game that actually took me more than 2 or 3 tries to actually get around. And so I was just feeling very frustrated. Moving on to other enemies, it started coming down to like the smaller mob type enemies where you would run into issues of them tanking through certain attacks. I'm always a big advocate in I'm always a big person that's against, excuse me, let me say that differently. I'm always against having an enemy that can just tank through shit unless they're legitimately and make sense a large enemy that isn't really going to be getting staggered like that. I hate the notion of an artificial difficulty scaling because somebody has no stagger damage to anything you're doing. And what that means for the uneducated means that stagger is when you're getting hit and you're reacting to it, and they're kind of getting stun locked in a sense because you're hitting them. However, a staggerless enemy, somebody that can't be staggered, is somebody that as you're attacking them can still just attack you at any time, mess up your rhythm, mess up your combos, whatever, and they're just acting like they never got hit. You know, people call us different things: hyper armor, super armor, you know, non-stagger, whatever. It has to make sense, and most of the time it doesn't. You know, I can understand, okay, you don't get staggered if you're using a shield because I'm hitting the shield, but the moment that I'm hitting you, you should be being affected by that. You should feel that you're a living being, you're a creature, in this sense, Yaogwise. So I don't know, you know, that type of shit I might get hate on, but I cannot stand that gimmick in games. And that followed through to other attacks and other people having more speed, whatever, and it started trickling more and more throughout the game. So it kind of had like this sense of artificial difficulty I didn't really like throughout certain portions of the game. The only time I'm like semi okay with the whole non-stagger situation is when it comes to bosses, because with bosses they can sort of make it in a way where it's rhythmatic and it's a feature of the actual fight. You hit 2 times on the 3rd and 4th combo attacks, they're usually breaking through your combo to then power through and attack you and something, and then you can dodge that or something. Like, there's a rhythm, there's a rhyme and reason to it. But when you start going outside of that is when I start to have an issue. It becomes tedious and becomes more gimmicky of like, okay, well, how do I even get an opportunity to attack you? Like I said, I'm okay with it with bosses if it's not overdone. Now, 20 minutes into this recording, let me get into everything that I loved about the game. The story is fantastic, and it's going to be really short-lived because it's more to articulate and say what I don't like than it is to tell you what I do like, because you can see how much I enjoyed the game just by watching my videos. And again, it kind of speaks for itself if I can just say it's good. It's very good, okay? The game is still very good all around. I know that me speaking for 20 minutes about these things that I didn't like makes it seem like the game is terrible. It's not. It's not terrible at all. This game is fantastic. It's great. The storytelling is so superb. The pacing of the story is like literally absolutely excellent. Nothing less than excellent. The side stories are amazing. The storytelling that I would say is considered a hidden storytelling is the fact that every time you defeat a single enemy for the first time, if it's like a smaller like boss mobby enemy type, you get to read a synopsis on what those enemies are, why they're in that area, and sometimes who their master is. And it gives you a little bit more history of not just the world that you're in, but you know, an explanation of the mindset of the creatures that you're fighting. And this is even moved further along with the bosses and the mini bosses that you fight in the game, because it'll give you like a poem, and then it'll give you a rundown of who that person is and what that person means to Wukong, or what that person means to this area, or who he means to this boss. And they'll have like interconnected and intertwined stories that's being told that you would never know if you didn't read the journal or look up a video that would explain and go through the journal. That is like storytelling masterfully. That's like a mastercraft on how to intricately intertwine your story that gives you an extra depth. It has an extra layer. Like, I don't know. To me, that shit was just is excellent. I loved, and this is just a staple on the channel. I love going through something and asking the question of like, why is this like this? Why is this enemy here? And then being able to actually read through that. Another game that did this was God of War Ragnarok. I think God of War 2018 also did it. But if I'm gonna be honest, there's not very many things I remember a lot from 2018 because it was a very dark time in my life, and I did a whole bunch of stuff to kind of forget all those things that happened, because it was very hurtful, and it was probably the most depressed time I was ever in my life until like a year ago or something. That was probably the next biggest time. moving past that, yeah, you know, certain games that do that, I always love, because it's just, again, it adds an extra layer for the people that are out there that are enthusiasts and truly want to know more about what they're playing. You know, this same thing kind of happens in games like Dark Souls, though, where all of the story is kind of told about the world around you through the items that you can grab, and you get the things through the item descriptions. But this is even more linear than that, because those are still cryptic like messages. In Wukong, you literally have a journal that has an image of it and has a poem related to that thing, and then aside from that, a story about that thing and that creature and why they're there, basically. I just love that, and it adds into the overall chapter as well. So by the time you get to the end of the chapter, you're understanding why everything is going on the way that it's going on within the chapter. And you know, this gets added upon when you run across creatures that look like they've been morphed or modified in some way. You're like, what the hell is going on here? And then you read about it and you're like, oh, so that's why we're gonna be doing this to beat this boss, because he's messing up stuff here in this area. And I just thought that was really cool, so I just wanted to spend extra time kind of pointing that out. Another thing I love about the game is the different weapons that you do get. So for reference, you only have a staff because Wukong is mainly a staff user, although he can use other weapons historically. I mean, he can turn anything into a weapon for real. You playing as the Destined One, you're not playing as Wukong in this game, but you playing as the Destined One also have a staff that you play with, excuse me. And you can also use this like, you can get spare kind of, I wouldn't say attachments, what's the word I'm looking for, a variation, like it's a variant of the staff, but it's a spear, and the spear would typically have a slightly tweaked move set to go with it, and that's really cool. Like, you do the same input commands for the same combo strings that you want to do, however the new inputs would the way the combo would change would basically show different animations, and they would do different stuff, sometimes doing more or less damage depending on the weapon that you have. And that's another thing. I love that you could actually upgrade your weapons and you can upgrade your armor. I love the variety of the weapons. Like, certain weapons had like a fire effect on it, or it had like extra poison resistance or whatever. Like, I thought those types of things were really cool. The same thing goes for the armor, and I think that they did an excellent job, an exquisite job actually, with the armor types and leveling up the armor. So if you get an armor, let's say at the beginning of the game, and you really like that, and that's a build that you want to go with, because remember, you have a skill tree, so you can kind of shape an entire build based off of spells that you have. Another thing I love, the spells and spell variety based off of your weapon that you have and the effects that they have, and then the armor types that you have, because there are armor, same thing for the weapons, there are armor effects off of the equipped, like just equipping it, and then there is like, okay, if you get 3 or 4 or 5 pieces of this exact armor set, you get this extra bonus added onto that. I love that. The thing that I loved even more was the aesthetic changes. So if you got like a common armor and then you upgraded it to the like the max that you can upgrade it to, I think is called mythical, and if it's not mythical, then it's called legendary, right? So they have these different armor tiers. The aesthetic changes as you level it up, as you upgrade the armor. I thought that was really cool, and I just think that it's just extra attention to detail, because getting it to its mythical or its max version is kind of getting it to its lore accurate version, in a sense. Like, if you do history of like how this armor type should look or something, or what it's based off of, you're like, oh, it looks kind of different, and then you start upgrading it more and more, and it's like that extra layer. Like, they really went over and beyond. Another thing I would love to touch on is the sound design and the music behind it in totality. I've always been a big advocate for saying that if you have a good soundtrack, on top of a good soundtrack, good sound quality and good sound design, like sound direction, like how Sony has been constantly pushing this 3D audio thing, that's huge, right? Because audio is a big experience. That's a big portion of somebody's experience. And you're playing a game like Wukong, the nature, the environments, the enemies, the grunts, the oh my gosh, bro, just everything in the game just sounded beautiful. It sounded great. it sounded so clear and crisp. And that's another thing that I would touch on, is the environments. They did such a good job tying in the sound direction and the sound design with the particular areas that you would roam around. There are multiple areas that you go to throughout this entire game, most notably just like changing through a certain area either once or twice within the same chapter. Another thing that I remembered that I really loved about this game, now that I'm looking back in the editing process, or something else about the environments, is the fact that they took so much from the culture and what actually is, and they built upon it, and they did it in a way that the fidelity of this game was so beautiful. It actually enthralled me to want to be more involved with Chinese culture and Chinese architecture, and how they create their buildings, how they created these monuments, how they built into the side of mountains, all this stuff. Like, it looks so gorgeous, it looks so beautiful, tied in to the sound design as well, but still keeping it all within a total region range within one singular chapter. For example, in like a chapter 3 scenario, you're on this huge mountain and you can explore multiple different caves and forest areas on the mountain, including like a separate little island, but you're still within like the same region, like you're still in this area. I just thought that's really cool how they did the environments and had this sort of open world like thing, and it really helped with the grand scope and feel of the game, because each chapter felt like its own world, and it felt lived in, and it felt like events actually happen there that you can still read about in the journal, not just from cutscenes to cutscenes to cutscenes. It makes you really feel the impact of the world that you're living in. Like, whoa, this big war happened with Wukong and the Celestial Court. Not a spoiler, this is stuff that happens before the events of the game and in the very beginning cutscenes of the game. So again, it makes you really feel the weight of everything that was going on, and how people have reacted, and how the Yao Guais, which is the enemies, but they're not always enemies, have inhabited certain areas and their takes on life and how they've been living life and stuff like that. So again, they did an excellent job with the environments, the sound direction, the combat. For the most part, the combat, again, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I will say that the combat got better the more lenient I became playing through the game. Like, oh, okay, this is what could happen in this game. This is how the combat works. This is how the counter works. Again, granted, if it wasn't stuttering or anything, it would be great. It's perfect. But I think maybe revisiting this game again, once it has ironed out those performance issues, be a absolute perfect experience. I truly don't have that much negative to say. I know I can articulate on the negatives because I gave a lot of examples, but the game has been damn near perfection. I think this is a great way to show somebody that you don't need all these microtransactions and all these extra things to monetize your game and to have this mass appeal. Work on the storytelling, work on a good story, work on a likable character if your story is following a likable character. If it's following somebody that's unlikable, then focus on how they're unlikable, right? Just focus on the gaming element of it, and truly think heavily about your marketing strategy, because that makes a world of a difference. If Black Myth Wukong didn't market itself over the last 5 to 6 years, maybe 7 years, nobody would know about this game. This game was first introduced to us in 2018. It shows us in the credits of the game, it has these different teams from 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, and 22, 23, all the way through 2024. So this game has been marketed for the last 6-7 years now, and it's constantly been being shown in different pieces, portions, but not too much. Anyways, you don't have to have that long of a marketing plan. What I'm saying is, please hire somebody that is trusted in the marketing world and truly think about how you want your game marketed, because Black Myth Wukong got the mass appeal through its marketing. Nobody knew anything about the game or how the game played up until like a few months before the game dropped, and when that came out, it was like, oh, it's not a Souls-like, it's an action RPG type. Like, that's when people started understanding the style of the game that it was. Of course, they had these small showcases here and there, but my point is, they marketed this game and built up hype, and they never let that hype die, even with the dead moments that we wasn't getting trailers. and stop focusing on these other outside sources. And this is a prime example of what a successful game should look like in 2024. Is every game, and do I need every game to be like this? Absolutely not. I think this game is great. It's a one of a kind, and there are certain games out there that come close to this production quality as well. It was very movie-like, even in performance mode. Again, playing on PlayStation, so I'm speaking from those terms. You can play on quality mode, or if you're playing on PC, you can just ramp up everything according to your GPU, CPU, and all that stuff, right? That you have your whole setup. Just the quality alone of this game felt like they took their time. And when I got to the credits of the game, I noticed that in the credits of the game, it said, like it had these different sections in there for different teams. It was like 2018 team, and then a bunch of names and what they did going by. 2019 team, 2020 team, 2021 team, 2022 team, 2023 team, and 2024 team. So that tells me that they've been working on this game for 6 years and have not stopped working on it. Let's do the math. 6-7 years, right? 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 7 years, 6-7 years, depending on how you want to count that they was really working and putting their foot in the door here. And they had multiple different people on various different teams working on the story, the art. And that's another thing. The artwork was fantastic. I loved how some of the artwork in the journal was taken from actual passages in the Black Myth, or excuse me, the Journey to the West original story. It was just so great. I love the cameos. I love doing like a little deep dive search history. And I guess the last thing to kind of close out here is I love that if you weren't somebody like me that went ahead and did like a reactionary video of reacting to like all the history of Journey to the West, and then actually deep dived and tried to learn a lot of the lore, which thank you so much for all the people that came through my streams that showed a lot of love and support and was giving me even more understanding of the story and different versions and iterations, but also, you know, giving me that acknowledgement that I really did learn a lot and that I had a substantial amount of knowledge for the story, considering I'm American. I don't have, you know, access to the original version of Journey to the West. And, you know, I really did try to do some research and learn and understand what I was going to be getting into so I could feel the impact and weight of some of those cameos and bosses that was in the game. For the people that understand, I think you all understand how I got super excited when I was seeing the words thrown around and hearing the names of like Tributaka, the Tang Monk, Erlang Shan. Well, actually, I didn't know who Erlang was until playing the game. But all these other people that was in the game, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's so fire. This is dumb. This is the pig he traveled with, Zubaje. So anyways, I loved how they tastefully took from the original and created their own iteration that actually felt like it could be a direct sequel to the Journey to the West story. But you don't have to know anything from the Journey to the West story to actually enjoy and take into this game, again, because if you want to learn more about the story, you don't even have to go outside sources to find it. You can just read what's in the journal and find out more, because it not only tells you more about the world that you're in by reading certain characters' transcripts in there, it also tells you about Wukong, and they have these beautiful animated things that happen at the end of each chapter that give you even more information about certain things, about what's going on in that chapter, how Wukong had affected it, and stuff about his journey to the West. So again, it's absolutely beautiful. It's amazing. I just loved everything that was in the game. For the most part, I didn't have that many issues with it. If you're looking forward to this game or you're on the fence about this game, definitely pick it up. It is a must-play title. I really do feel that for any action adventure RPG enthusiast out there, and for people that are historians too. Maybe it's time for you to try a video game, because this might be something that could be up your alley as you see historic landmarks and things that are based off of a story and things that you have spent a lot of your time trying to learn and uncover, and seeing it in a digital photorealistic format is just superb. I can only imagine if the amount of excitement I was getting from just getting introduced to the story and doing some research like a week or two prior to the game releasing, how much somebody that did years and years of research would feel playing this game and seeing all the homages. With that being said, I really do appreciate it if you enjoyed the vibes, if you could slide subscribe, as it helps thrust my channel in the algorithm. I love you. Thank you so much for all the love and support. And, you know, subscribing may help you out in the future as I try to do giveaways and give back to my community when and wherever I can. I did do a giveaway about 2.5-3 weeks ago for Sparking Zero, the deluxe version of that. So I do these giveaways live so I can show you guys I'm not faking this. I am trying to really do good by my audience, because I really do appreciate anybody that pushes me up in the limelight and enjoys my form of entertainment for you guys. All right, stay safe out there. I know this is a long one, another 40-minute video, probably edit it down to like 30 or something, I don't know. And I'll catch you in the next one. The world is crazy. Stay safe. Bye.
I never felt like I never felt like